going to do that right now. Let's see. Okay, let's see. Okay, sorry about that. Let's see. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I decided to do something a little different to present tonight. What I decided to do is I took a look back at all of the various Mooseplate grants that we've received over the years, and I put together a presentation showcasing all of the various projects that we've done. So it's very diverse, and I thought that it would be a good opportunity to share some of the different things that the State Conservation Committee has been able to fund in the past in Hillsborough County. The first Mooseplate grant that we got was back in 2002. It was when the Mooseplate was still funding educational efforts and not just simply on the ground efforts. And it was when, prior to my time with the district, but it was when they were very interested in conservation education. So the district received funding to be able to purchase Grow Lab greenhouse models to support their efforts within the county. And they had already received funding previously for Grow Lab models, but this was just an extension of that project since it was so successful. And the purpose was to provide a model to elementary school science teachers throughout the county as a way to teach kids about plant, soil, light, and water balance, as well as ecosystems. So right there is a picture of what the Grow Lab model looked like. And here's some pictures of the Grow Lab model in action. The picture with the teacher, she was from Hollis. And then the picture to the right is of some students in Manchester with one of the volunteers at the time, Peter Brain. And then the bottom picture is just showing you what some of the students may have used the greenhouse model for. And the program formally ended in 2006. All of the models have been distributed to various schools in 18 towns and cities within the county. One thing I have to say is it was really great that we were able to put so many Grow Lab models in both the Manchester and Nashua schools, which is great. And some of the models are still in the schools today. We just unfortunately kind of lost track and don't really follow it as much as we did back in 2002. In 2004, we continued on with the Mooseplate and we applied for funding to get some desktop gardens. The teachers that had the full-size models showed an interest in having some more portable, smaller models. So we applied for funding to get more of those. We did get 10 desktop models and then 5 additional full-size models, and we added those into additional schools within the county. In addition to that, we did get some funding to add on worm factory compost bins to teach the students about composting and how to reduce their waste in a green way. Here you can see pictures of what the model looks like with some children, as well as the worms. We did give some of the red wiggly worms to all of the teachers that were interested. We did partner with Beaverbrook Association in Hollis to host a workshop, and their educators helped by teaching that workshop. And some of those models are still in the schools today. There were 12 worm factory bins that were distributed throughout the county. In 2014, we switched gears and we ended up applying for funding to help support a project that NRCS had actually brought to the table. There was a farmer in the town of Merrimack who farms right along the Souhegan River, and he was experiencing some severe stream bank erosion, which was affecting his agricultural land. So we ended up applying for a Mooseplate grant to be able to, I'm sorry, 2014, I'm ahead of myself. This was our Building Healthy Soils Equipment demonstration workshop. I apologize. So this one was where we focused on soil health, and that was a topic of interest to farmers statewide at the time, and it remains the same today. We wanted to provide a hands-on approach to educate and support farmers. We offered 3 equipment demonstrations and workshops that were held over the course of 2 years. The first workshop was focused on zone till and no-till, cover crops and mulching. And we also offered demonstrations of the roller crimper and the zone builder equipment. We ended up using the roller crimper equipment that is housed over in Cheshire County, and the farmer had a zone builder. So that was a really great piece of equipment to showcase to the farmers. The second workshop was we featured the Cornell Soil Health Assessment, and a penetrometer and the NRCS Soil Health Kit was demonstrated at that one. And that had really great attendance as well. The third workshop was in partnership with the Rockingham County Conservation District and the Stratford County District. And it was focused more on pasture and grazing management techniques. And it featured the yeoman's plow and the airway soil aerator, which I believe the airway belongs to the Rockingham and Stratford districts. And that was very well attended as well. And here's some pictures from the various events. Okay, now in 2015, this was the Sauhegan River Stream Bank Stabilization Project, which I was just talking about. This was a project that was brought to us from the USDA NRCS. They were working with a farmer in the town of Merrimack who was losing some prime agricultural farmland, and they looked to the district to see if we could secure some funding to assist with the project. So what we were able to do is secure some funding through the Mooseplate grant to help with the preliminary part of the project. We hired field geology services, and they conducted a fluvial geomorphology assessment, and they were trying to determine the severity of the erosion and ways that they could stabilize the banks while keeping the health of the river in mind. Since they were following these recommendations, it would increase the opportunity to provide habitat and protect the buffer, which was going to be installed upon construction completion. They were looking at doing some bioengineering techniques, like placing logs and root wads in the stream rather than using riprap techniques, which is the traditional way. Upon completion of the initial work, the farmer was able to secure funding through NRCS to complete the construction and then finally do the buffer planting to complete the project. So I feel like this is a really great example of a way that the district was able to partner with NRCS and leverage various funds in order to complete a project that was much needed. In 2017 is when the Hillsborough district decided to try and add some equipment to their inventory. We at the time hadn't had equipment available for rent in quite some time, since many, many years ago when it was more common for districts to own equipment and rent it out. So the first piece of equipment we decided to try and get was the no-till seed drill. Since no-till farming and practices was of a big interest statewide, and especially in Hillsborough County, we felt like it was a good piece of equipment to start off with. We saw an increased need, but a lot of the farmers didn't really want to put forth the funding in order to purchase and maintain the equipment that would be necessary in order to try these practices out. So at the time, we identified 8 producers in the county who wanted to use the no-till drill. So we applied for funding through Mooseplate and were funded a contract. So we've been fortunate to have assistance from board members to help educate interested farmers on proper usage and to assist with the maintenance and repairs. We also have an arrangement with Chapel Tractor, who is right next door to our office. They store and maintain the equipment for us. Over the years, we have increased participation in the number of acres the equipment has been used on, not just in Hillsborough County, but bordering counties as well. We rent the equipment out too. From May of 2019 through April of 2021, we had 21 users covering 598.5 acres. And it continues to be a very popular piece of equipment. In 2021, we received a Mooseplate grant for a reclamation and wildlife restoration project in the town of Hollis. This is our newest project right now. So we're currently working with the Hollis Conservation Commission on this project. And we are looking to reclaim close to 5 acres of abandoned farm fields. They have a plethora of invasive species that need to be eradicated. And then the idea is to create and maintain some wildlife openings to attract more wildlife back to the field, which, as you can see, is really overgrown. The work on that project began in the spring of 2021, so this past year. And stumps were removed and rocks in 2 of the fields. And then the stumps were moved into a berm that's going to hopefully be to attract wildlife and create habitat on the south end of the field. The area will be smoothed out in preparation for regular mowing, which is the next step. And here is just a before and after picture of the work that was done this spring. The field, the way the field looked prior to the stumps being removed, and then the after picture once the stumps were removed and it was smoothed out. The project is going to continue in the spring of 2022. The next step is brush hog mowing and starting to treat some of the invasive species on the property. And the project is expected to be completed in the spring of 2023. Finally, in 2022, just this past September, we applied for funding to try and get a lime wood ash spreader, and we were successful, which is very exciting. This piece of equipment has been of interest to the farmers in our county for a few years now, and many have expressed an interest. And unfortunately, until now, we've had to direct people to other counties to utilize the equipment. So we are really excited to be able to offer this equipment in the coming year to the interested farmers. And that's all that I have. And I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Kerry, this is Tom. Do you how much usage do you have any kind of numbers to how many people will probably make use of the lime wood ash spreader?
Yes, we had maybe about 5 or 6 farmers that submitted letters of support that were interested. But then I also worked with the NRCS field office, and they provided me with some information on farmers that were interested in using it based on their contracts. And I would say we have at least about 14 or 15 farmers.
That's cool. Thank you. Nice work.
That's a pretty diverse amount of different projects you had going on there.
Kerry, what's the next piece of equipment you're going to get?
You mean after the lime wood ash spreader?
Yeah.
I don't know. We haven't thought about that yet. I know that was one that's of interest. So it sounds like there's going to be many districts throughout the state that's going to offer that equipment, which will be wonderful.
We found in Stratford and Rockingham, there's a lot of like small horse farmers that have piles of manure and no place to spread it. So we're researching and getting just a small manure spreader that a 30 horsepower tractor could, and that would spread it out in the pastures and the fields, because they have the only thing they've got is a pickup truck and a shovel, and that's not a very motivating prospect to go forward with. Are there any other questions? Well, thank you, Kerry.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Next up, we have Dr. Anton Bekkerman from the New Hampshire Ag Experiment Station. In 1975 to 77, I had a project with the Ag Experiment Station, and I'm sure there's a lot of new things going on that weren't there when I was there. So we're going to turn this over to Anton Bekkerman.
Thanks, Dick. I don't know. It's still pretty much the same. It's fine. Let's see. Can you guys see my screen? Let me try to move it. All right. All right. Cool. So yeah. As Dick said, I'm Anton. I'm the director of the Ag Experiment Station here. I've been here. Boy, it's still feels like I'm relatively new to both UNH and New Hampshire. I've been here for a year and a half, but it's a COVID year and a half. So it's basically like just arriving, a month ago. But I spent the last 11 years at Montana, at Montana State University. I was an ag economist on the faculty there, and as well as an associate director of the Montana Ag Experiment Station. But I'm very excited to have joined here. It's been a great year and a half so far. And as we get less COVID-y, I'm hoping to really get out there in the state and just make the experiment station more well known. And this is definitely, I jumped on this opportunity because this is definitely one of these things that I want to do a lot as I continue here. So before I kind of move on to what we're doing at the Ag Experiment Station, what I want to do is talk a little bit about this. Just a little background to give you the context of what we are relative to some of the other parts of what a land-grant university is and sort of the land-grant mission within the state. Some of you might know this, so this might be a review. Some of you might be sort of putting the puzzle pieces together. So back in the 1800s, there was this idea that like, hey, farming is pretty important and the population of farmers is pretty big, and but there's a bunch of universities that we have here in the United States, and most of the people who go to those universities are like upper income, really wealthy people. And if we're going to move our country forward, then we're going to have to like create a system where we have higher education for kids of farmers. And so Justin Morrill, who was a senator from Missouri, from Vermont, he came up with this Morrill Act, which created land-grant universities, one university in every state and I guess territory, at least one university in every state and territory of the United States. And that was intended for, if your check don't bounce, you're in, you have a chance, no matter what background you're from, you have at least one semester where you can try to get a higher education and go forth from there. But, about 15 years later, there was this realization that, hey, wait a second, we're trying to teach a lot of the farm and rural community about sort of new methods, but there's no like research that helps us come up with these new methods. And so then at that point, William Hatch, a senator from Missouri, introduced the Hatch Act, which created ag experiment stations. And so the idea there is that, hey, this is going to be, we're going to take some money from the federal government, we're going to match it with some money from each state and territory, we're going to put this pot of money together because no single farmer has enough money to fund really long-term research, which agricultural research is. And we're going to help create this system of research that then could go down and be taught at these land-grant universities and across communities. So that was great. And then about 30 years later, there was a realization that, researchers are really good at doing research, but they're not really good maybe at getting out and getting that research out into the communities. And so this third part was created, which is the extension service of, okay, let's take this research and let's allow these stakeholders and communities to actually get this research from folks who can translate it into those communities. So that's kind of the three parts of what the land-grant mission is. Again, it's sort of separate. So the land-grant universities, the Morrill Act is the education part, the Hatch Act, the Ag Experiment Station, that's the research part, and then extension, the Smith-Lever Act is extension, getting that information out. So we are the Ag Experiment Station. We have been around since 1887. We're basically a cornerstone of ag, food, natural resource, environmental research and development as a public agency. We are the longest running research center in the state. And it's all about sort of ag, food production, environmental, natural resource insights. We have some incredible scientists. We've got close to 50 scientists who are part of or doing research projects on behalf of the experiment station. And we think about these really big issues like, hey, let's talk about climate change. How are these super integrated systems going to react if 20 years from now the temperatures are higher, or if we have a changing system of precipitation and growing seasons, et cetera, et cetera. So it's these big issues that the science is trying to solve. In terms of what we have, just a little more specifics within the experiment station, I kind of think of it as people, programs, places. So our people are the researchers, they're the scientists in training, they're the graduate students, the postdoctoral scientists. It's our stakeholders, the citizen scientists, it's the people who interact with us, who tell us, hey, we have this problem, we don't know how to deal with it. Tell us how to solve this problem. And when questions like that arise, and typically they may arise first with extension professionals, and extension professionals say, you know, that's a really interesting question. I've never heard it and I don't know the answer. And no one else has thought of this question. Let's go to our ag experiment station and have them do the research to figure out the answer. That's an incredible interaction that is really important. We obviously have our farm and facility support and me. In the director's office, we have a communications person and a research operations. Our programs are really diverse. I mean, they go from ag to insect and pest management, to dairy science, to genetics and genomics, to sustainable aquaculture. They're kind of all over the place, but all fit within that mission of ag, food, natural resources, and the environment. And I'll jump into some of the specifics of those programs in a little bit. And we have our places too. If you've ever driven around Durham and seen some of the farms around campus, they're probably part of the ag experiment station. So we have the Woodman Horticultural Farm, the Kingman Farm in Madbury. We have a conventional research dairy, that's the Fairchild Dairy. We have an organic research dairy, one of only two research organic dairies in the country, and the first one at a land-grant university. We have our greenhouses, we have our equine complex, and our fields around the Oyster River kind of location where we grow our feed for our equine and dairy animals. This is what we look like. We're a pretty good investment. If you think about the return on investment, the S&P 500, the stock market gets about a 10% return on investment. In the United States, the annual rate of return on ag R&D is about 15%, and in New Hampshire, that return investment is 20%. So you should all take all of your money, and instead of putting it into mutual funds, just invest it in the ag experiment station, and you'll be good to go. Let's see if I can change that. Thanks, Kerry. Let's see. Let me stop share and try that again. Can you guys see that now?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. How do I go back? There we go. Can you still see it? Okay, I think so. All right. So here's that. Let me go back just to show you the triangle in case that was missed. Just to show you that there is separation across the land-grant universities, the academic, the extension, the ag experiment station side, but we're all related. And here's our programs. Again, I'll talk about some of the specifics in a little bit. So yeah, like I was saying, it's a great investment. Put all your money into ag experiment stations because it's just such a good investment, right? Here's what we look like. We have about 47 research programs that we have going on, about 40 graduate students, postdocs. The farm and forest acres that are associated with our research is about 810 acres. We have close to 300 dairy cows, and we really consider pretty much everyone in the state our stakeholder, because everyone eats, everyone uses the environment, everyone is somehow affected by the research that we do. Over the past, 20, 30 years, we've been really good at getting a lot of our research out to our stakeholders and to especially the industry. We have an incredible kiwi berry program happening. We have an incredible table grape program happening. We've really gone into the aquaculture space, and I know that New Hampshire is the #1 growing shellfish production state in the United States in terms of speed of growth. Brent Loy, if you knew him, incredible plant breeder who is responsible for 80 new varieties of different cucurbits. And I talked about the organic dairy. And where we're going, gosh, it's far. I mean, it's everywhere from local food system security to value-added products, to really ensuring that the food, water, and forest maintain that economic growth that's really supported the economies of the state. I want to jump in a little bit into some of the things that are some of the projects that are specific and maybe of particular interest to this group. One is we have an incredible core group of scientists who look into soil microbiology and from various perspectives. And I wanted to just highlight a few projects here. Stuart Grandy, he looks at this idea of cycling of nitrogen through soil, and he really wants to change the foundational understanding of how nitrogen cycles through soil across land types and how management plans should change given these new understandings of how N cycles through soil and the interaction with microbial communities there. Dr. Jessica Arnakovich, you see her in the picture here in the blue, taking a soil core sample. She's looking at the interaction between cover crops and soil microbes and how different cover crops and across different types of cover crops and different land types, how they affect the soil microbes that are available for those next crops that are going to be produced there, and what management strategies are going to increase good microbe populations and which are not. And then Dr. Sarita Fry is looking at the forest side of things and looking at how does microbial activity in soils in forested land affect the carbon loss that might happen from those soils, and whether we can change management practices in those timber stands to reduce how much soil carbon escapes. On the wildlife side, really, there's a couple really strong researchers who focus primarily on sort of the interaction between urban and urbanizing communities and wildlife interactions. So Dr. Kovac looks at how urbanization splits apart parcels and how wildlife interacts with that, and whether certain land conservation strategies can help maintain the network of wildlife even in these urbanizing areas that we're seeing more and more of. Similarly, Dr. Bekkerman looks at how small mammals in forested areas help contribute to the production and the sustainable production of trees and timber after a harvest. So what she's found is that small mammals are really important at taking really important fungi into those newly harvested areas, and that increases the sustainability and speed with which those trees can regenerate themselves. Drought is super important, especially going forward, and really drought is one of those topics that is, I don't want to say perfect for ag experiment stations, but this is what we do, right? We ask questions that may not be important today, but are going to be super important 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, that when those questions are going to be asked, we want those extension agents, we want our teachers at our land grants to have answers to those and be based in really good science. And obviously climate change is a really important aspect of that. Several really cool projects here. Dr. Heidi Asbjornsen, she works on really looking at simulating what happens to trees and different species of trees that are here in the Northeast when they're impacted by lower precipitation. So the picture that you see on the slide is one of her experiments at Thompson Farm here in Durham. Those are, you're looking from the top, and those are these side by side where she has some trees that are not allowed to get precipitation, they're covered by plastic, and some trees that are right next to those trees that are allowed to get precipitation. And she looks at those comparisons, and it's really cool that she finds that different tree species react differently when they lack precipitation. Some go into dormancy really quick, while others really like party on and they just increase all the resources and hope for rain that might happen later. We have some UAV data. I know I'm running close on time, so going to try to get through these fairly quickly. We have some data. Scott Ollinger is looking at how do we improve our understanding of drought impacts on both forested and ag land by using better UAV data, and what kind of UAV data is going to be important to figure that out. And John Gunn, he is looking at, well, if past management of certain tree stands and timber harvest was really kind of poor or maybe not as effective, and that has degraded the type of production that can occur, are there policy approaches or management strategies that can rehabilitate those? This is the last slide, and then I'll pass it on to our next presenter. But with an incredible amount of, with close to 10,000 miles of rivers and shorelines and estuaries in New Hampshire, water is super important. And from our perspective and from what we do at the experiment station, it's really important in that interaction between how we manage land and how that affects water. So Will Wolheim, he looks at sort of this nitrogen management near storm flows and near watersheds, and really looks at how water flow of rivers can help mitigate the downstream impacts of nitrogen that might come off of those lands. Kat Ashcraft, she looks at the environmental justice piece of it. So what she's looking at is how land conservation can increase the equity of being impacted by climate change. So if we have a flood, typically the people who are, the populations who are more impacted are those who are in the lower income socioeconomic statuses. Well, can we change how we conserve land and change conservation, land conservation methods so that we have less of that inequity from those things? All right, I'll stop here. We have so much more. This is just, I'm touching on the basics and the little bits of what we're doing within the experiment station. I would really encourage you to visit our website. We worked really hard over the past year to really make it much more accessible. All of our research projects are there. You can sign up for our news and events. We started a new publication called Inspired, which is really going to dive into the science, but in a very accessible way. And you can certainly learn more about the station there. All right, Dick, I'm going to turn it back to you. I've probably run out of time for questions.
Oh, we got some time.
That's okay.
We got a few minutes. How do conservation districts get to interact with your research and start putting it into practice, or actually finding people to volunteer to do a replicate off campus? Yeah, so part of the thing that was both attractive about this job for me and a big opportunity is to really increase the interaction between our researchers and our stakeholders. So rather than going the traditional route of, well, our stakeholders go to the extension professionals, and then if the extension professionals have questions, they can ask our scientists. That sort of works when you have fully employed and fully staffed units. We kind of don't have that. And so really what we want to do, and what I want to do, is have our scientists interact more with our stakeholders, including our conservation districts. So the best way right now is to reach out to me, and I will connect you with folks who are maybe closely related to the things that you are interested in finding out or working on. I know at least a little bit about each research project, and even if I can't talk too smartly about the science, I can connect you with the person who can. So I would probably be the first person to get in touch with if you have questions. But another way is certainly to look at the website and look through all of our researchers, and their projects are listed there with really short abstracts of what they're doing, and you can certainly reach out to them directly. And on my plan of, once we finally get past Omicron or Theta or Omega, whatever the last Greek letter is, when we can start getting out into the state, it's really taking our science on a road show around the state and
and sharing it with our communities around the state. As I mentioned, I've been in Montana. Driving 7 hours one way is no big deal. I think if I drive 7 hours in New Hampshire, I can, circle the state 4 times over. So distances are not a problem here. It's just, getting those things set up and getting our scientists out there. I'm a big believer that we can't expect everyone to come to Durham all the time. We got to get out there too. So reach out to me, or maybe in a year, maybe 6 months, we can meet in your communities.
Any other questions?
I was just gonna do a plug. Anton, great job, and I'm really excited about the outreach, and your enthusiasm is very contagious. So thank you for all you do. One thing that we're trying, we got one of our grants is a National Fish and Wildlife Foundation grant, and we built in money to do some town forest plans. And so we were able to include about $5,000 to hire some graduate students, working with some of your scientists to do some measurements and look at soil carbon and before and after stuff after timber harvest. So I think we're looking forward to being able to be getting involved in that piece of it as well.
Yeah, that sounds great, Donna, and please reach out to me, and I can definitely connect you with. I've already have 2 or 3 names in my mind who would be really good with that, and recruiting graduate students. So yeah, that's great, wonderful.
Anton.
Yeah.
I have to say that is absolutely the best historical construction of the 3-legged stool I've ever heard in my life. It was great. Thank you.
I do what I can. I got to tell you that the only time that I didn't go to a land-grant university is my undergraduate. I was in a small liberal arts school, but I got hooked in my PhD program, and I don't ever see myself leaving a land-grant university. And that tripartite part of it is a big reason why. So I will prophesize with fervor. So yeah.
Any other comments? Well, thank you, Anton. That was fabulous.
Great. Thanks for having me, Dick.
Next up tonight is Eric Masterson from the Harris Center for Conservation. It's in Greenville, someplace near Greenville.
Hancock.
Hancock. It's quite an operation. They do a lot of stuff. I've seen Eric's occasionally has a webinar on ornithology, and he conducts bird weekends on the Isle of Shoals during the migrations. I was scheduled to be on one 2 years ago, and we got COVID kind of prevented it from happening, so I was a little disappointed with that. But I think he also worked with where Tom Jones was once at the Piscataqua Land Trust.
That's right. That's right.
So you've kind of been all over the middle of the state. And I know one of the things you like doing is recording the migrations at night with the audio of the migrations, and he listens to birds flying through in the middle of the night.
Yeah, the nocturnal migration, that's a whole nother subject. But it's fantastic what flies over our houses, your backyard, my backyard in spring and fall, that we really, most of us don't have a clue about. So thank you, Dick, for inviting me. I was asked to come on and just talk a little bit about what the Harris Center does. So I'm the land program manager for the Harris Center, and we are this here is this lake in the middle of this slide is Lake Nubanusset. Peterborough is down here, if you can see my cursor. Keene is down around about here, and Route 9 up towards Concord in this direction. And we have, to borrow the analogy from Anton's talk, we have a bit of a three-legged stool. We're a little bit different to other land trusts in that we, land conservation is one focus of the organization, but we also have a pretty strong citizen science program. And we have a strong program, an outings program also. So it's kind of a neat symbiotic relationship where our land protection feeds into the work that we do in schools and citizen science, and then we have a pretty strong program of hikes that we lead on our land. So it's a nice circular feedback loop we have. So the land, we have we have a lot of land. We have 24,000 acres, but in a very, very small area. And that's another thing that sets us slightly apart from other land trusts, is that we have our land acquisition program dates to 1970. So it's essentially 50 years old, in which time we've built up a portfolio of 24,000 acres. And a very strong, when we take on new projects, one of the driving factors is their contiguity to existing conservation land, because we're trying to look at 100, 200, 1,000 years, and who knows what the landscape is going to be like. But in the off chance that we still have large ranging animals like eagles and bobcats and bears, and one hopes that we will, and I have no idea, how much of the land will be built out in 1,000 years, but at least we can be sure that where we create contiguity, that will exist for large ranging mammals and birds. And so, to give you an example, when I joined the Harris Center 10 years ago, we didn't really have much connecting. This is the Andorra forest block here. The pale lemon colored is other organizations. The dark green is Harris Center. And over the last 10 years, we've built up this 2,000 acre corridor connecting Andorra Forest to the Harris Center's core sanctuary, which is centered around the Briggs Preserve down in the Hancock area. And this is essentially an internally imposed constraint that it's basically a board designated line. It doesn't follow town boundaries, but it's essentially a process whereby if it's within that boundary, it's a kind of an 8-town area. We don't follow town lines, but it's an area that encompasses some or all of 8 towns. And if a prospective project falls within that, then we generally consider it for that's the starting gun for us to consider a project. And that really puts a strong emphasis, because we have such, again, if you compare us, and this is not to say we're better or worse than other organizations, but just to contrast us with the Monadnock Conservancy, which is a terrific organization. They work across 35 towns, but because we have this very constrained area that we work in, by definition, most of our new land acquisition projects are going to be contiguous or very close to contiguous to other existing conservation land. So that's pretty exciting. One of the things that I talked about the three-legged stool. One of the things that we did then do I work in land protection, but we have Brett Thalen, who works in citizen science. And we actually just recently hired a fellow from Audubon, Phil Brown, as a bird conservation biologist. And so we have various conservation oriented projects that we conduct on our land. So for instance, broad-winged hawks, these are very common hawk that essentially breed east of the Mississippi from the Gulf Coast up to Canada. But they have this fantastic long distance migration that takes them, essentially they evacuate the entire continent, North American continent in the fall to winter from Guatemala south. And we worked with Hawk Mountain in Pennsylvania to attach transmitters to hawks that we found breeding on our land. We found about a half dozen this summer, and we put transmitters. This is a solar powered transmitter on the back of this broad-winged hawk that broadcasts a GPS point once every day. And this is one of the birds. Within a few weeks, you could see it was heading down to Connecticut. And this is the latest map I pulled off today. So we have, I think our birds are the pink bird and the green, no, not the green bird, the pink bird and the blue bird and the purple bird perhaps. But anyway, they're all down in South America now in Colombia. So this is it's a really cool way of tying back land conservation, what's, people, what is the value of when we go out fundraising for a particular land project, what is the value of it? Well, these are creatures that that breed in our forests, and if we don't have healthy, intact forests, we don't have these critters. And we work in about 30 area schools in Southwest New Hampshire. We have teacher naturalists that bring programming out to about 30 area schools. And so this provides really good content for just closing that loop, land protection, and the value of land protection and the conservation value therein. We also have just put up a Modus station on a plot of land that we own south of Route 9. And Modus is a slightly different way of tracking animals. Because the transmitter that is on that broad-winged hawk is several grams, and generally birds can't carry more than 3. They're not the accepted for scientists who work in the area of attaching satellite transmitters to birds. The accepted weight ratio is about 3% of a bird's weight. And so that essentially limits this sort of technology down to the size of a hawk or a crow, thereabouts. You can't use satellite transmitters on birds that are much smaller than that. Modus tags by contrast are significantly smaller, so they can be attached to much smaller birds like sparrows, and even there are smaller tags that can even be put on dragonflies and moths. And so we put this is essentially a receiving station, and these tags are put on birds that are captured, and then they transmit, and as they have to, excuse me, they have to pass within a certain distance. I think it's 1.5 kilometers of the station to have the signal received. And then we go out once a month and we download the data from the recorder. And again, it's just there's a string of these that have, we're working with the Fish and Game and New Hampshire Audubon, essentially the intent is to have a string of these running east-west across the state to Vermont. So essentially northbound and southbound migrants will bisect will essentially register with one of these towers on their way north and south, and it's another management tool for gauging population metrics of various species of animals. And we have other programs. We have a amphibian crossing brigades that this is a particular project close to Brett Thalen's heart. Essentially, during spring migration of amphibians and frogs, essentially engaging local volunteers to help these critters get across busy roads. And actually, we've had some success in getting some roads closed during heavy migration nights. And so that's basically a really short snapshot. I think it'd be easier for me now to take questions. That's a pretty short snapshot of what we do. We've slightly over 1,000 members. We're like I said, we're in about 7 or 8 towns. We're based in Hancock, and I'm happy to take any questions. Hearing none.
Well, how many?
Sorry, go ahead.
Sure.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask what how unique this idea of contiguous land is to sort of what you're doing in the Harris Center and their work. I know that when I lived in the West, obviously there's much larger fauna there, and so that there were several of these endeavors to just create large swaths of land where you could, say, have bison roam and have prairie dogs and sort of that kind of approach. Are you relatively unique in that contiguous land conservation approach, or is this something that is more widespread in the Northeast and in other places?
No, I think if you were to ask any land conservation professional in the state, they would say it is a weighted metric for every land protection project. And so it's definitely an added positive. I can't imagine there's any organization out there would say it's anything but an added positive. And so to the degree that it is, weighted, I think the Harris Center stands out, and that we basically by virtue of restricting our work to such a small area. So if someone called me I actually just had a conversation with the Monadnock Conservancy today. Someone came to us with 80 acres in Antrim. Now we work in Antrim, but this was in Eastern Antrim, in the east part of the town of Antrim, and it's outside of our area. And I put them in touch with the Monadnock Conservancy because, and if the Monadnock Conservancy had said no, we probably would have, we may well have gone ahead. But our preference is to work within this small, this restricted area, because we place such a very high priority on contiguity. But I would think every land trust does. And if you look at the green clusters in the state, they are in a sense clusters. The Southwest is definitely one. The North Country is definitely one. And so, unfortunately, when many land trusts, I think, are in the process, in the business of, it's difficult to be choosy when you're relying to a degree on the goodwill of donors. And so, if you get offered land, and because dollars are at such a premium, if you get offered land, especially donated easements, it's very hard to say no. And if that doesn't always come with the guarantee of contiguity.
What's the percentage that's in easement rather than fee?
So we have 24,000 acres, and of that, about 12,000 acres is in easement, and we own about 6,000. And I get a sense, and we certainly would prefer to take fee, and I get a sense that other organizations are drifting in that direction too, because it has, it offers the flexibility of management. Essentially, you have management control that you don't have with easements, but there's a cost. It's a costlier option to own land and fee.
This is Tom.
Hi, Tom.
Hey, Eric. Very nice to meet you. I also work for the Piscataqua Land Conservancy, which Eric used to be executive director of. And I would just like to confirm that if you look at it, a conservation easement is something that you have to monitor every year and take responsibility for, but it's not an asset, it's a liability. And a fee property that you own is an asset. And they're both protection, and the mission, we have this about the same percentage that Eric has said in terms of fee versus conservation easements. And we do prefer fee, but conservation easement does seem to be the majority of the protected land. Does that sound right, Eric?
Yeah, absolutely. We have twice the number of acres in easement than we have in fee. And if we had the option of easement over no conservation at all, we're absolutely going to take easement, because it's a fantastic tool. And in some ways, it's even, so for every, Tom's absolutely right. It's a greater burden. You have to monitor property. We have to insure it essentially against violations. So an easement violation can run into 6 figures with court costs. And so we have all of our easements. We have 120 easements, give or take, depending on how you count them. And we have each one of those insured against violations, so that we don't get, we're not bankrupted by a series of violations. And that has a cost too. So yeah, it's a lot more work. You don't have to, there is no mandate for us to monitor. A wise land trust will monitor its fee land, because it's the right thing to do, but there's no mandate for us to do it. We're mandated to monitor easements from a variety of sources. And so yeah, it's a higher burden to have an easement. But again, it's a very valuable tool in the toolbox.
Have you had that much opportunity to partner with your county conservation district?
I think that's a tool I don't use enough, to be quite honest with you. And I'm glad you invited me here tonight. We have, in certain instances, I know they've been a great asset with respect to providing mapping services. I think they helped us on it. We did an arm we had an ARM, the Aquatic Resource Mitigation Fund. We had an application into the ARM fund for a project a couple of years ago, and I believe that they were helpful in that regard. To be quite honest with you, I probably don't know enough about what they can do for us, and that's on me. So I should rectify that.
Well, let me introduce you to Kerry Rickrode, the director of the Hillsborough.
Hey, Kerry.
She's in the upper left corner of mine. And Tom Jones is a supervisor of the district. So you've made the initial step tonight, and hopefully you'll go forward. I'm interested in your educational programs. We sponsor an event called the Envirothon, where kids get high school kids and middle school kids do a series of contests in forestry, wildlife, soil, and then there's a contemporary issue that they have to make a presentation as a group on. And I'd like to get together with you and talk about how some of the schools that you work with might be interested in doing this. And it sounds like your establishment could be a great site for trainings for these kids occasionally. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have the land-based resource, and then we have an actual center where we have a pretty nice meeting room and all of the audio visual facilities that come with that. So yeah, I'd love to talk to you about that.
One thing we also have is county conservation planners and connections to NRCS. So we can be a pretty good early warning system. It sounds like your network within your project area is a good focus, but that may be one of those places where we've got folks that have their ear to the ground and can help steer people your way too.
The one thing we don't have a lot of in our area, Donna, is farmland, and so we rarely get pulled into the into the direction of farmland easements and all of the programs that opens up. I don't know if because are you from the conservation district in Keene?
No, I'm from Belknap County, but because New Hampshire is New Hampshire, probably the NRCS does more acres of projects and practices on forest lands than they do on ag lands. And so that's another place where, again, forest planning and improvement and improvements, are some of the things that NRCS does that would connect with your area.
Yeah, no, I don't want to.
Some of your larger landowners might qualify for being able to get qualify for NRCS programs that would help with doing conservation practices.
Okay, like QUIP and EQUIP and those programs. Yeah, we have steered landowners in that direction before, and we have some of our own land. We have cost shared on various projects with NRCS, and we have a couple of properties enrolled in the tree farm program. So yeah, we do. I don't think we do that though through the conservation districts. We normally work directly with NRCS. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. And Dick, yeah, let's drop a line and see if we can follow up on that. You're muted, Dick.
thank you. This has been excellent. I've learned a lot tonight. It's been another great evening between Kerry, Anton, and Eric. Your presentation has been fabulous. Are there any parting comments from anybody? Next month, we're meeting with Rockingham as the Spotlight District. The Commissioner of Agriculture is back. He was here last February. And we have the FFA coming back. They were a big hit last year. I hope we get more people to see them in action and talk with them. So we'll sign off tonight, and it's been a great evening, and everybody stay safe.
Thank you, Dick.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.